Hey guys, tonight we are going to leave the familiar world behind and drift gently back in time, all the way to the year 1500. We're going to find ourselves in the middle of a vast shimmering lake in the heart of modern-day Mexico, paddling through the canals of a city that shouldn't exist, but somehow does, the great Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. It's a city built on water, a metropolis fed by gardens that float, and we're going to learn the slow, methodical secret of how they were engineered. You'll be able to almost feel the warm, humid air and smell the sweet scent of millions of flowers. And as a little reality check, if you were to actually fall into these waters, the combination of unfamiliar microbes and a complete lack of antibiotics means you almost certainly wouldn't survive the experience. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love to see where everyone is listening from, so feel free to post your city or country and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the causeway. You've been walking for what feels like hours, a straight, impossibly wide road stretching across the surface of the water. The Spanish, when they arrive a few years from now, will say it's wide enough for 10 horsemen to ride abreast, a testament to an engineering vision that feels almost defiant. The stones beneath your bare feet are cool in the morning air, and on either side of you, the calm, gray-green waters of Lake Texcoco extend to a horizon ringed by distant, slumbering volcanoes. For a long time, the city is just a smudge in the distance, a heat haze promise, but as you draw closer, it resolves into something real, something impossibly grand. It doesn't rise from the land, it rises from the water itself, a dream of white plastered stone and the deep red of towering pyramids. This is Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire, and at this moment, it is one of the largest, most populous, and most powerful cities on the entire planet. As you step off the solid stone of the causeway and onto the island proper, the sounds of the city wash over you. It's not the clatter of iron-shod wheels on cobblestone you might expect from a European capital. The concept of the wheel, while known, wasn't used here for transport or pottery. Instead, the air is filled with 100,000 human voices, the rhythmic slap of canoe paddles against water, and the distant, steady pulse of a drum from the great temple precinct. The air smells of damp earth, wood smoke from countless cooking fires, the heavy perfume of flowers you can't yet see, and a faint, metallic tang on the wind that you wisely choose not to question too deeply. You walk through streets that are cleaner than any you could imagine. There are no piles of refuse here, no mud-filled ruts. In a detail that would stun contemporary visitors from Europe, the city employs a dedicated sanitation workforce, over 1,000 strong, whose only job is to sweep and wash the public thoroughfares every single day. You could probably eat your lunch directly off these plaster streets, though with the sheer variety of delicious-smelling food being sold from canoes and market stalls, you'd have absolutely no reason to. It's just one of the first of many things that unbalances your expectations. This is a world that is both incredibly sophisticated and fundamentally different from any other. As you wander deeper into the city, you begin to grasp the central, mind-bending truth of Tenochtitlan. It's not really an island. It's an archipelago, a dense network of man-made islands, separated by canals that serve as liquid streets. Some of the main plazas and ceremonial areas are built on solid, established ground, but much of the city is a delicate latticework. Homes, some humble, some grand, are built on stilts right over the water's edge. The primary mode of transport isn't the foot, but the canoe. You see them everywhere. Long, narrow vessels gliding silently along the waterways, piled high with goods, pottery, textiles, firewood, and mountains of fresh green produce. It's a city without traffic jams, unless you count a canoe pileup in a particularly busy canal, which you can imagine was the local equivalent of a fender bender, likely resolved with less horn honking and more quiet, passive-aggressive paddling. The sheer number of people is breathtaking. Historians still argue whether the metropolitan area of Tenochtitlan housed 200,000 people or pushed past 300,000, a population dwarfing London or Paris at the time, and you feel every one of them. The press of bodies is constant, but orderly. You see the porters, the tlamame, shuffling past with impossible loads, supported by a single strap across their foreheads, their legs and backs conditioned to carry the weight of the empire's commerce. You see nobles in brilliant cloaks of blue and green featherwork, their status announced by the jade and obsidian piercing their lips and noses. And you see the common folk, clad in simple but clean white cotton, moving with a sense of purpose. And standing here, amidst the hum of this water world, a question begins to form in your mind. It's a quiet question at first, but it grows louder with every canal you cross and every new district you enter. You look at the lapping water, the houses on stilts, the vastness of the lake surrounding you. You see the thousands upon thousands of people, and you wonder, where does all the food come from? There are no sprawling fields, no rolling pastures, no land to spare. How does a city floating on a lake feed an empire? The answer, you realize, is not on the land. It must be in the water itself. That question hangs in the air, as heavy and humid as the atmosphere of the valley itself. Where does the food come from? To answer it, you turn away from the bustling city center and walk towards the edges, towards the true nature of this place. The solid, paved ground gives way to packed earth, and then to something softer, spongier. You're at the shoreline, but it's not a shore of sand or rock. It's a blurry, indistinct line of reeds and marsh grass, where the land and the water seem unable to decide on a firm boundary. This is the great geographical puzzle of Tenochtitlan. The very thing that makes the city a fortress is also its greatest agricultural challenge. You're standing on the edge of what you've been told is Lake Texcoco, but that name is a convenient simplification. It's actually a closed basin system of 5 interconnected lakes, a vast sheet of water fed by mountain runoff with no natural river to drain it away. This is crucial because it means that for centuries, minerals have washed down from the surrounding hills and become concentrated in the water through evaporation. The 2 southern lakes, Chalco and Xochimilco, are mostly spring-fed, keeping them fresh and full of life. But here, in the northern part of the system where Tenochtitlan was built, the water is shallow alkaline, and distinctly brackish. You can smell the salt in the air, a faint, sharp tang like a coastal estuary. You dip your fingers in the water. It doesn't feel like fresh lake water. It feels slightly thicker, and you know instinctively that trying to water a field of precious maize with this would kill it in a week. This watery world is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a perfect defense. An enemy army can't simply march up to the city walls. They have to fight their way across the narrow causeways, which are easily defended. But the water is a fickle protector. During the rainy season, the lake levels swell dramatically. With no outlet, the water has nowhere to go but up, and catastrophic floods were a constant, recurring threat to the city. The Aztecs became master hydraulic engineers out of necessity, building massive dikes, some stretching for 10 miles, not just to hold back the floods, but to strategically separate the salty water of Lake Texcoco from the precious freshwater of the southern lakes. It's a bit like living in a beautiful, historic house where the plumbing is constantly threatening to explode. Great views, high anxiety. So the water is a problem, and the land isn't much better. Where there is solid ground, it's mostly reclaimed swamp. You press your foot down, and the earth gives slightly, water seeping up around the edges of your sandal. This is not the firm, loamy soil you dream of for a farm. You couldn't drive a plow through this muck. It would just sink. The entire foundation of the empire's capital is built on this unstable, waterlogged ground, making conventional, large-scale agriculture right here a complete non-starter. Yet, you see people harvesting things from the lake itself. Not fish, but something else. Women are out in shallow canoes, wielding fine nets to skim a shimmering blue-green film from the surface of the brackish water. This, you learn, is tecuitlatl, spirulina algae. They gather it, dry it in the sun into greenish cakes, and sell it in the market. It's incredibly rich in protein, and according to those who eat it, has a savory taste, a bit like a strong cheese, while other empires were farming wheat and barley. The Aztecs were, in a way, farming the pond scum itself and turning it into nutrient-dense protein bars. You have to admire the sheer ingenuity, the refusal to see any part of their environment as useless. Even so, algae cakes can't sustain a population of this size. The main agricultural lands are miles away, on the slopes of the surrounding mountains where they use terrace farming, or on the distant shores of the freshwater lakes. Archaeologists still debate the timeline and scale of early agriculture in the valley, but one thing is clear: to support the explosive growth of Tenochtitlan in the 15th and early 16th centuries, these methods were becoming dangerously inadequate. The city was outgrowing its pantry. The logistics of bringing enough food into the city every single day, via canoe and porter from these distant farms, would have been a monumental, perhaps impossible, task. You stand there, at the marshy edge of the world's most impressive city, and you finally understand the full scope of the dilemma. You have a massive, hungry population living on an unstable island. That island is surrounded by water that is either too salty for crops or prone to devastating floods. The ground itself is swampy and unsuitable for farming. The reliable food sources are too far away to be efficient. It's the ultimate urban planning paradox. A city perfectly placed for defense, culture, and trade, but located it in quite possibly the worst place imaginable to grow a sandwich. It's a situation that would lead most civilizations to simply pack up and move, or to cap their population and stop growing. The challenge seems absolute, the environment hostile, but the feeling you get from the people of Tenochtitlan isn't one of desperation. It's one of confidence, of mastery. You realize they didn't see this place as a collection of problems to be solved. They saw it as a medium to work with. They looked at the water and the muck not as obstacles, but as raw materials. And that shift in perspective would lead them to create a solution so elegant and so effective, it would leave the world breathless. They couldn't go around the water, so they decided to build on it. Standing at the edge of that swampy shore, you feel the full weight of the problem. It seems absolute, yet the solution, when you begin to understand it, is born from the problem itself. It's an idea that doesn't fight the environment, but partners with it. It didn't arrive in a single flash of brilliance, a eureka moment for some long-forgotten Aztec engineer. It was likely a slow, creeping innovation, an idea that evolved over generations. You can almost picture it. You imagine a family living at the reedy edge of the lake, noticing how tangled mats of water hyacinths and other floating vegetation would drift into a cove and get stuck, trapping silt and mud carried by the currents. Over months, these mats would become thicker, heavier, until tiny plants, their seeds dropped by birds, would begin to sprout from them, an accidental garden floating on the water. And then, the thought, the revolutionary spark. What if you did that on purpose? What if you created a better, stronger, more stable mat? What if, instead of praying for firm ground, you simply built your own? This is the conceptual leap that changed everything. It wasn't about draining the water to get to the land beneath. It was about using the water and the land, the muck, the mud, the vegetation, to create something entirely new. This is the birth of the Chinampa. The name itself tells the story, coming from the Nahuatl words Chinamitl, a woven fence or enclosure of reeds, and pan, which means on the surface of, a garden built on a woven frame. Now, the term we often use, floating garden, is beautifully romantic, but a little misleading. It conjures up images of verdant little rafts drifting lazily around the lake, which would be a logistical nightmare for any farmer. The reality is far more stable and ingenious. A chinampa doesn't float freely. It is firmly anchored to the lake bed. Think of it less as a garden float in a parade, and more as a garden piling in a construction site, not as whimsical, but infinitely more effective for feeding an empire. The core principle is breathtakingly simple and profoundly clever. You are essentially building a long, porous, rectangular box right in the shallow waters of the lake. Then, you fill that box with the perfect recipe for agriculture, alternating layers of rich black mud scooped from the lake bottom and layers of decaying vegetation and waste. This layered construction is the secret. The mud is unimaginably fertile. The collected nutrients of the entire valley washed into the lake over millennia. The decaying plants provide aeration and structure. And because the entire structure is sitting in the lake, the plants growing on top can wick water up through the soil, directly to their roots. It is a self-irrigating, and as we will see later, a self-fertilizing system. You are not just farming the land, you are manufacturing the perfect land for farming. It's a matter of some debate among historians and archaeologists whether the Aztecs invented the Chinampa system wholesale, or if they simply adopted and perfected a technique while it had been in use on a smaller scale by older cultures in the Valley of Mexico. The evidence seems to suggest the latter, but it was the Aztecs, with their rapidly expanding empire and the unprecedented demands of Tenochtitlan's massive population, who took this small-scale concept and transformed it into an engine of industrial-scale agriculture. They turned a clever gardening hack into the foundation of their entire economy and military might. The idea feels almost divinely inspired, and to the Aztecs, it likely was. Their patron god, the fierce Huitzilopochtli, had prophesied that his people should end their long migration and found their capital at a very specific spot, an island where they saw an eagle devouring a snake while perched on a nopal cactus. This divine sign led them to the swampy, unstable island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, a place perfect for defense but seemingly terrible for settlement. It was as if their own gods had presented them with an impossible challenge, a riddle that could only be solved by an equally impossible agricultural innovation. The creation of the Chinampas was not just clever engineering, it was the fulfillment of their destiny. You can almost see the Aztec planners standing where you are, looking out at the vast, shimmering, shallow expanse of the southern lakes. They don't see a useless swamp. They see a grid, a blueprint overlaid upon the water. They envision a new world of long, narrow, fertile islands, all separated by canals just wide enough for a canoe to pass through. A perfect geometry of productivity. It's like they were playing SimCity with real mud and reeds, and their one and only goal was to max out the food per square foot ratio. And spoiler alert, they absolutely nailed it. The plan solved every problem at once. It used the useless mud to create fertile soil. It used the abundant water for constant irrigation. And most importantly, it placed the farms right next door to the consumers, cutting down the supply chain to practically zero. This solved the biggest challenge of fresh produce delivery, the getting it there fresh part. The Aztec farm-to-table distance was about 20 feet. The idea is there. It is elegant, powerful, and holds the key to the future. It promises endless food, a secure city, and a thriving population. But an idea, no matter how brilliant, is just a whisper in the wind. The next step is to turn that whisper into a roar of creation. The plan exists, but now comes the immense, back-breaking work of turning a watery dream into solid, living earth. The idea is one thing, a perfect concept of self-sustaining agriculture. The reality begins with sweat, skill, and the steady rhythm of deliberate work. To see it happen, you leave the stone and plaster heart of Tenochtitlan behind. You find yourself in a long, narrow canoe, gliding through the quieter canals towards the great southern lakes, Chalco and Xochimilco. The water here is different. It's fresher, clearer, and the sharp, salty tang of the northern lake is replaced by the sweet, earthy smell of decaying leaves and rich soil. The air is alive with the calls of herons and egrets and the frantic paddling of ducks. This is the agricultural zone, the future breadbasket, or perhaps more accurately, the maize basket of the empire. Your canoe pilot steers you towards a wide, open expanse of the lake. The water here is shallow, perhaps only coming up to your chest, and the sun warms it through. In the distance, you see a group of men standing in the water, their brown skins slick and glistening. They are not slaves, but free men, members of a kalpoli, a local clan or district guild that holds land in common. This new Chinampa will belong to their community, and its bounty will feed their families and be sold in the great markets. Their movements are unhurried, economical, a kind of watery ballet perfected over generations. The work begins not with digging, but with measuring. You watch as a foreman, a man whose authority is conveyed through quiet confidence rather than loud commands, directs the process. There are no laser levels or GPS satellites here. They create their perfect geometry with simpler yet brilliantly effective tools. A long rope, woven from the tough fibers of the maguey plant, is stretched taut between two poles to establish a perfectly straight line. The foreman squints, sighting along the rope, calling out small adjustments. They are marking out the dimensions of the future garden. The standard Chinampa is long and narrow, typically about 2.5 meters wide and 30 meters long. That's about 8 feet by 100 feet. This specific shape is not arbitrary. It's a critical design feature. The narrowness ensures that moisture from the surrounding canals can saturate the entire plot, right to its very center, eliminating the need for surface irrigation. They're essentially laying out the property lines for a series of very, very wet townhouses, all with spectacular waterfront views and direct access to the mud-based grocery store just below. Once the corners are marked, the heavy work starts. Other men wade out, carrying long, sharpened wooden stakes. With heavy, stone-headed mallets, they begin to drive these stakes deep into the soft mud of the lake bed. The sound is thick and resonant, a percussive thump, thump, thump that echoes across the placid water. It's a slow, powerful rhythm, the heartbeat of creation, stake by stake. The perimeter of the rectangle takes shape, a ghostly fence standing in the open water. It remains a point of academic discussion just how sophisticated their tools were. Lacking iron or steel, the Aztec toolkit was made of stone, wood, and bone. The mallets are dense wood or stone. The blades they use to sharpen stakes or cut reeds are razor-sharp obsidian. The immense efficiency they achieved with these so-called primitive tools is a quiet testament to their profound understanding of materials and leverage. With the main posts firmly in place, the weaving begins. This is the China needle, the woven part of the name. Workers bring huge bundles of reeds and flexible branches. Standing in the water, they begin to intricately weave these materials between the stakes, creating a strong, dense wattle wall that rises from the lake bed to just above the water's surface. It's a bit like underwater basket weaving, only instead of making a nice little fruit bowl, you're meticulously crafting a 100-foot-long industrial planter. The scale is slightly different. The fence isn't meant to be solid like a dam. Water can still pass through it slowly, which is part of the design. Its purpose is to act as a container, a massive basket to hold the immense weight of the soil and vegetation that will soon fill it. You sense that this is more than just a construction project. This is a sacred act. You can imagine a local priest present at the start of the day, burning copal incense that sends fragrant white smoke drifting across the water. Perhaps small offerings were made, a sprinkle of maize, a drop of blood, to gain the favor of Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility, and Chalchiutlicue, the goddess of the lakes. To the Aztecs, the creation of new land was a partnership with the divine, an act of nurturing the earth that would, in turn, nurture them. By late afternoon, the frame is complete. You paddle around it in your canoe, marveling at the clean lines and the sturdy construction. It's a stark and beautiful piece of engineering, a perfect rectangle of human intention imposed upon the gentle chaos of the lake. For now, it's just an empty enclosure. The water inside is the same as the water outside. It looks a bit like a failed attempt to build a submerged zoo exhibit, but you have to trust the process. The real magic, which consists of many, many tons of mud, is about to begin. The skeleton is in place, strong and waiting. Now, they must give it flesh. With the rectangular frame standing ready in the shallow water, the act of creation begins in earnest. The skeleton is in place, and now it's time to give it flesh and substance. This is not a delicate process, but one of immense, rhythmic labor. The first thing to go into the enclosure isn't mud, but plants. You see men in canoes poling their way over, their vessels piled high with tangled masses of green and brown aquatic vegetation dredged from the surrounding canals. With great heaves, they dump these floating weeds and water hyacinths into the frame, forming a thick, springy base layer. It seems counterintuitive, filling a future garden with what looks like pond waste. But it's the first step in a brilliant, layered recipe. This vegetation provides bulk, aeration, and as it slowly decays, a long-term source of nutrients. Then comes the main ingredient, the magic, the muck. Other workers, standing in the water or on the edges of nearby Chinampas, begin to use long-handled wooden scoops. They plunge them deep into the lake bed, right alongside the new construction. There's a thick, satisfying sucking sound as they heave the scoops up, laden with the rich black ooze from the bottom. This isn't just dirt. It's the treasure of the valley. It is centuries of fine silt, clay, fish droppings, decaying algae, and countless other organic materials, all settled into a dense, nutrient-packed slurry. This is the primordial soup that will give life to the new garden. With a practiced swing, they heave the contents into the frame, on top of the vegetation layer. The black mud spreads, thick and heavy, a single, splattering note in the quiet air. And so it goes, layer by layer, in a process that feels ancient and deeply methodical. A layer of weeds, a layer of mud, another layer of weeds, another layer of mud. It's the world's most organic, gluten-free, large-scale lasagna. The layers aren't pasta and cheese, but pondweed and primordial ooze, which sounds significantly less delicious to us, but is a gourmet meal for a growing maize plant. This layering continues until the new bed rises a good meter, about 3 feet, above the surface of the lake. The final layer is always the finest mud, dredged from the deepest parts of the canal, which the workers carefully smooth over the surface, like a dark, rich icing on a very strange cake. The fertility of this manufactured soil is legendary, but the Aztecs had a few extra tricks to enhance it. Bioarchaeologists are still exploring the precise recipes and the complex microbial ecosystems that made this soil so uniquely potent. It wasn't just a random mix. It was a carefully managed living system, and one of the key ingredients came directly from the city itself. Tenochtitlan had a sophisticated system of public latrines and a dedicated fleet of canoes whose sole job was to collect the city's human waste. This night soil wasn't just dumped. It was transported to composting sites, allowed to age and break down, and then methodically worked into the Chinampa soil. It gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, eating local. The city's waste from yesterday was quite literally processed to become the city's food for tomorrow. It was a perfect, closed-loop system of sustainability and a concept that was almost entirely absent from the filth-ridden streets of contemporary European cities. As you watch the workers toil under the sun, you can see the transformation unfold. What was, this morning, an empty skeletal fence in the water is now a solid, tangible thing. A long, dark rectangle of new earth, steaming slightly in the heat, resting in the cool embrace of the lake. It smells profoundly alive. A mix of wet soil, fresh greens, and the faint, not unpleasant scent of decay and regeneration. The men who have built it have not just constructed a farm plot, they have created land itself, turning the water and the mud into a solid platform for life. The new Chinampa is not ready for planting just yet, however. It's too waterlogged, too unsettled, like a great cake just out of the oven. It needs time to sit. For several days or even weeks, the plot is left to drain and settle, the excess water slowly seeping back into the canals. The community will tend to it, perhaps smoothing the surface as it dries and compacts, ensuring it reaches the perfect, sponge-like consistency. This is the part of the construction process where you have to be patient and let the giant mud loaf firm up before you try to decorate it. Rushing the process would only lead to a very sad, very sunken garden that dissolves back into the lake. But if they are patient, what they have now is the perfect foundation. The brute force of construction is over. A solid, fertile island now exists, where only water was before, waiting for the final touch that will secure its place in the landscape for centuries to come. The new Chinampa is a solid, dark rectangle of earth, but it is still vulnerable. It is, in essence, an extremely well-organized mud pie sitting in the middle of a lake. A strong storm, a minor flood, or even just the slow, persistent lapping of the canals could gradually erode it, washing the precious, hard-won soil back into the water. This masterpiece of construction needs one final, living touch to make it permanent. It needs an anchor. You see the workers return, but this time they are not carrying scoops or mallets. They are carrying long, slender saplings. These are cuttings from a very special tree, the ahuejote, known to science as Salix bonplandiana. It's a species of willow native to these highlands, a tree that loves water as much as the Aztecs themselves. It grows fast. Its wood is strong yet pliable, and most importantly, it develops a dense, fibrous, and incredibly thirsty root system. With gentle care, the workers plant these saplings at each of the four corners of the new Chinampa, and at regular intervals along its long sides, pushing them deep into the soft, damp earth, where they will have no trouble taking hold. This is not just landscaping. It is the final critical step of the engineering process. As these willow saplings grow, their roots will spread out through the Chinampa bed like a vast subterranean net. They will weave themselves through the layers of mud and decaying reeds, binding the loose material together into a single, cohesive unit. This living root system is the natural rebar that gives the Chinampa its long-term strength and stability, holding it firm against the constant pressure of the surrounding water. It is this tree that transforms the Chinampa from a temporary construction into a permanent feature of the landscape, an island that will last for centuries. The Ahuejote is the ultimate multitasker, a true partner in this agricultural enterprise. Beyond providing structural integrity, the mature trees will offer a host of other benefits. Their leafy canopies will provide dappled shade during the hottest parts of the day, protecting delicate seedlings from the intense sun. They act as a natural windbreak, sheltering the crops from the strong winds that can sweep across the valley. And the tree itself is a renewable resource. Its branches can be regularly pruned for firewood or for weaving new baskets and fences. These willows are part structural engineer, part security fence, and part living umbrella. They probably would have helped with the dishes if only someone had figured out how to ask them. But the tree had another, more intimate secret. The bark of the Ahuejote is a traditional medicine. It contains salicin, the natural compound that forms the basis for salicylic acid, the active ingredient in modern aspirin. After a long, grueling day of hauling mud and weaving fences, a worker could brew a tea from the bark of the very tree they had just planted to soothe their aching back and pounding head. It's a beautifully circular piece of natural wisdom. The tree that demanded back-breaking work to plant also provided the cure for the resulting backache. That's what you might call a truly full-service piece of vegetation. While the Ahuejote was undoubtedly the star of the show, ethnobotanists continue to discuss the full range of species used to stabilize the Chinampa ecosystem. It is likely the Aztecs planted a variety of other water-loving plants along the borders, creating a complex and resilient edge habitat. Certain plants could have helped to repel pests, others might attract beneficial insects and pollinators, and their combined root systems would have created an even tougher barrier against erosion. It wasn't just a wall of willows. It was a living, breathing, integrated community of plants, all working together. You look at the spindly saplings, just thin sticks poking out of the dark earth, and you imagine their future. In a few years, they will be strong, graceful trees. Their roots, unseen, will have claimed every inch of the Chinampa as their own, locking it to the lake bed. Their branches will whisper in the wind, a home for nesting birds. They are the final seal on the contract between the people and the lake. With the anchors planted, the heavy construction is finally complete. After weeks of careful measuring, stake driving, and mudslinging, the workers can finally get down to the actual business of gardening, which must have felt like a veritable vacation. The raw, vulnerable plot has been transformed into a secure living platform, a permanent island ready and waiting for the seeds that will feed an empire. The Chinampa is now a permanent living island, anchored firmly in place by the roots of the graceful Ahuejote trees. But it is not an island in isolation. Its existence is defined by the space around it, by the shimmering liquid pathways that give the entire region its unique character. You step from the solid earth of the Chinampa into the waiting stillness of a canoe, and with a gentle push, you glide out into the canals. It's here, in the spaces between the land, that you understand the second half of this engineering marvel. These canals are not an accidental byproduct of the construction. They are a deliberate and essential part of the system. In the very act of dredging up mud to build a chinampa, a canal is simultaneously dug alongside it. They are two halves of a whole, a system of land and water in perfect symbiotic balance. As you drift along, you see that this is a grid of unparalleled scale, a vast watery checkerboard of green, fertile squares separated by cool, dark channels of water. This is the circulatory system of the Aztec agricultural heartland, and its functions are as elegant as they are vital. Their most important role is one of quiet, passive service. The canals are the engine of irrigation. Because the water level is kept relatively stable and the Chinampas are built of porous material, the water from the canals constantly and gently seeps into the soil. This process of sub-irrigation or capillary action draws moisture upwards directly to the roots of the plants. This means no farmer ever needs to haul a bucket of water. There are no complex networks of irrigation ditches to dig or maintain on the Chinampas surface. The plants, in essence, water themselves, drawing up exactly what they need from the massive reservoir just a few feet away. It's the ultimate lazy gardener's dream. The system frees up the farmer from the back-breaking task of watering, allowing them to focus on planting, weeding, and harvesting. But the canals are more than just a passive irrigation system. They are the highways of the empire. You pull your canoe over to the side to let a massive cargo boat pass. It sits low in the water, piled high with a mountain of green beans and bright orange squash, paddled by 3 men on their way to the great market at Tlatelolco. You see smaller canoes, perhaps a father and son with a net, fishing in the shade of the willows. The entire commerce of the region flows through these liquid streets. Silently and efficiently, there is no sound of grinding wheels, no smell of beasts of burden, no choking dust. Just the gentle slap of paddles on water and the soft murmur of voices carrying across the channels. This was their version of the interstate highway system, except it was cleaner, quieter, and the only traffic jams were caused by particularly stubborn flocks of ducks. These waterways were also a source of food in themselves. They were carefully managed aquatic pantries. The Aztecs raised fish in these channels and harvested freshwater shrimp and crustaceans. They would gather the eggs of certain aquatic insects, a delicacy known as ahuautle, or water wheat, and swimming in the murky depths was the famous axolotl, the bizarre and fascinating salamander that lives its entire life in a larval state. This creature, now critically endangered but once abundant here, was a prized source of protein. The canal was not a sterile ditch. It was a thriving ecosystem that provided a secondary crop of aquatic life to supplement the agricultural bounty of the Chinampas. Historians and engineers still marvel at the precision of the Aztec water management system. To maintain this delicate balance across a network stretching for miles required a level of hydraulic control that was simply unparalleled anywhere in the world at that time. Through a complex and still not fully understood system of dikes, dams, and sluice gates, they controlled the flow between the 5 lakes, preventing the salty water of Lake Texcoco from contaminating the fresh water of Chalco and Xochimilco, and managing the seasonal floods. It was regional water engineering on a scale that European powers wouldn't even attempt for centuries. You lean back in the canoe and just drift for a moment. The sensory world of the canals is deeply peaceful. The sound is of water lapping against the hull, the low hum of insects, and the high-pitched call of a kingfisher as it darts past. A flash of turquoise and orange. You see the perfect, shimmering reflections of the sky and the green Chinampas on the water's surface. A world turned upside down. You can smell the sweet perfume of dahlia and marigold flowers grown for the temple, mingling with the rich, damp scent of the soil itself. You pass another canoe, and the family inside nods a quiet greeting. You can imagine this is how all news was passed, how gossip was exchanged. A floating social network where you could literally paddle away from a boring conversation. The Chinampa and the canal are a perfect closed loop. The Chinampa provides the food, the canal provides the water, the transport, and another layer of sustenance. One cannot function without the other. The system is built, it is anchored, and its lifeblood is flowing freely. The engineering is sound. But one question remains. How do you keep it going? Harvest after harvest, century after century, without the soil running out of energy? You are standing now on the firm, damp earth of a mature Chinampa. The system is built, anchored by willows, and its lifeblood flows in the canals on either side. But this raises a new, fundamental question, one that has plagued farmers for all of human history. Any plot of land, no matter how rich, will eventually become exhausted. Every harvest of maize, beans, and squash pulls vital nutrients out of the soil. In most agricultural systems, this means letting fields lie fallow for a season, or relying on massive inputs of manure from livestock the Aztecs didn't have. With the Chinampas being farmed so intensively, they should, by all rights, have burned out in a generation. So how did they keep them going? Not just for years, but for centuries. The answer, like so many of the Chinampas' secrets, is right there in the canal. You watch a farmer pole his canoe to the edge of his plot. He holds a long-handled wooden scoop, a tool you recognize from the initial construction. He plunges it down into the dark water, deep into the canal bed. With a practiced heave, he brings up a scoopful of the rich black ooze from the bottom. But he's not building a new garden. Instead, he deftly flips the scoop and spreads this fresh, wet mud in a thin, even layer over the surface of his existing Chinampa, right between the rows of growing plants. This simple, repeated action is the key to the entire system's sustainability. This is how the Chinampa's fertility is renewed. Periodically, perhaps after a harvest or before a new planting, the farmer would dredge the nutrient-rich sediment from the bottom of the canal and reapply it to the garden bed. This sediment is a perfect, all-natural fertilizer. It's a compost tea brewed over decades, containing not just silt and minerals washed down from the surrounding mountains, but also the rich organic matter of decaying algae, the waste from fish and waterfowl, and the decomposing leaves and roots of aquatic plants. It's like getting a delivery of the world's finest, nutrient-packed topsoil brought directly to your canoe step. No shipping fees required. This single, elegant task accomplishes two crucial things at once. First, it remineralizes the Chinampa, replenishing the very nutrients that the previous harvest removed. Second, it keeps the canals from silting up. Without this regular dredging, The canals would slowly fill with sediment, becoming too shallow for canoes and reducing the volume of water available for irrigation. So the act of fertilizing the farm is also the act of maintaining the highway and the irrigation reservoir. It's the kind of brilliant two-for-one solution that modern efficiency experts write entire books about. You can imagine them composing epic poems about it. Ode to a well-dredged canal. It surely would have been a local bestseller. Soil scientists are still studying the complex nitrogen cycle within the Chinampa system to fully understand its remarkable productivity. The constant layering of organic muck and vegetation likely created the perfect habitat for nitrogen-fixing bacteria, microbes that can pull elemental nitrogen from the air and convert it into a form that plants can use. This provided a steady, free supply of one of the most important nutrients for plant growth, a process modern agriculture has to replicate with synthetic, fossil fuel-intensive fertilizers. The genius of this system extended to the very act of planting itself. You notice the farmer isn't just scattering seeds. In a shaded, protected corner of the Chinampa, he has a small, special bed. Here, he has formed the rich, fresh mud into small, damp cubes. With his finger, he presses a single seed into each cube. This is an almatsiga, a seed nursery. Here, the seeds can germinate in a perfectly controlled, nutrient-rich environment, safe from pests and weather. Once a seedling is strong and healthy, the farmer simply picks up the entire mud cube and transplants it, seedling and all, into its final spot on the Chinampa. This technique minimized transplant shock, ensured that no seed was wasted, and allowed for incredibly precise spacing of plants, maximizing the yield of every square foot of this precious man-made land. You realize that what you're witnessing is a gentle, continuous rhythm. It's not a frantic struggle against nature, but a conversation. Scoop, spread, plant, grow, harvest, then scoop, spread, plant, grow, harvest again. It's less of a chore and more of a partnership. The farmer says to the land, "You have given me these wonderful tomatoes," and then responds by saying, "Here is some wonderful mud in return." It is a perfectly fair and deeply delicious transaction. The system wastes nothing. The waste that accumulates in the canals becomes the very fuel that powers the gardens. With this final piece of the puzzle in place, you understand. The Chinampa is not just a farm, it is a regenerative machine, an engine of perpetual abundance. The engineering is complete. Now, it's time to see what this miracle soil can truly grow. The Chinampa is not just a clever piece of engineering, it is a machine for creating abundance. Having seen how it's built, anchored, irrigated, and fertilized, you are now ready to witness its true purpose. You stand on the rich, dark earth and look around you. This is not like a southern farm, with its endless, uniform rows of a single crop. This is a dense, vibrant, almost chaotic tapestry of life, a garden pulsing with an energy that feels utterly tireless. In the rain-fed fields of Europe or other parts of the world, a farmer is a slave to the seasons. You get one, maybe two harvests a year if you're lucky, and the long winter months are a time of hunger and scarcity. The Chinampa farmer knows no such constraints. With a constant, year-round water supply wicked up from the canals and the mild, stable climate of the Valley of Mexico, the Chinampa is a garden for all seasons. This unique combination of factors allowed for a level of productivity that is difficult to comprehend. A single plot of land could yield up to 7 distinct harvests per year. This wasn't a rare feat. It was the standard. You take a slow walk along the length of the narrow garden. You see the great staples of Mesoamerica, the Three Sisters, growing in a perfect, symbiotic harmony. Tall, sturdy stalks of maize reach for the sun, and climbing up their woody trunks are the delicate tendrils of bean vines. The maize provides a living trellis for the beans. In return, the beans fix vital nitrogen in the soil, feeding the nutrient-hungry maize. Sprawling around their base are the broad, rough leaves of squash plants, their huge leaves shading the ground, which suppresses weeds and conserves the precious moisture. But the garden's diversity goes so much further. You see rows of plump tomatoes, the tomato, blushing a deep red in the sun. Beside them are their cousins, the tomatillos, smaller and greener, each one wrapped in its own delicate, papery husk. And of course, there are the chili peppers, the chili, in a bewildering variety of shapes, sizes, and colors, from long and slender to short and round, promising a spectrum of flavors from a mild, smoky warmth to a ferocious, eye-watering heat. Standing tall and proud are the feathery, deep purple plumes of amaranth, a hardy grain that was as important as maize, ground into flour or toasted for a nutty, crunchy snack. It's like walking through the produce aisle of the world's most ambitious organic grocery store. Everything is bursting with life, and you get the distinct feeling that if you stood still for too long, a curious squash vine might just try to climb up your leg. Agricultural historians still debate the exact yields and caloric output of the Chinampa system, as the Aztecs left no detailed ledgers, but all estimates agree that the productivity was staggering, far outstripping anything seen in the Old World at the time. Some calculations suggest that a single hectare, about 2.5 acres, of Chinampa could reliably produce enough food to support 20 people. This incredible efficiency is what allowed the colossal city of Tenochtitlan to thrive. The secret to the 7-harvest year lies in the Amatziga, the seed nursery system you saw earlier. The Chinampa is never fallow. It's a non-stop, overlapping relay race of cultivation. In one section, a crop of maize might be just a few weeks from being harvested. Right next to it, a crop of beans is already halfway up its stalk. And in the space where a crop of tomatoes was just pulled out yesterday, the farmer is now carefully plugging in new, healthy seedlings of amaranth that have been patiently waiting in their little mud cubes. There is no off-season. There is no downtime. The moment one crop comes out, the next one goes in. There was no winter is coming anxiety for a Chinampa farmer. Their biggest worry was likely ensuring they had enough baskets for the next harvest, which was scheduled for, well, next week. Among all this abundance, you notice a plant with small, unassuming leaves and delicate blue flowers. This is chia. Long before it became a health food fad, chia was a cornerstone of the Aztec diet and economy. The tiny, nutrient-dense seeds were ground into flour used to press a rich oil, or most famously, mixed with water to create a thick, nourishing gel. This drink, called Cianpinoli, was the original energy drink, consumed by the empire's swift-footed messengers and elite warriors to sustain them on long, arduous journeys. It was the perfect compact fuel for an empire constantly on the move. This relentless, year-round explosion of life was the engine that powered the Aztec world. This agricultural security, this freedom from the fear of famine, was the foundation upon which the Great Pyramids were built. It freed up a huge portion of the population to become priests, artisans, soldiers, and merchants. The Chinampa didn't just grow food, it grew a civilization. The Chinampa did not just create a civilization, it shaped the lives of the people who worked it. To understand this intricate system, you must, for a moment, become one of them. For this small stretch of our journey, you are a Chinampero, a farmer of the floating gardens. Your day begins before the sun. You awaken not to a jarring alarm, but to a subtle shift in the light and the growing chorus of birds in the willow trees outside your small home. The house itself, made of reeds and mud, with a thick thatch roof, is built right on the edge of your family's Chinampa. The first thing you smell is the cool, damp, earthy air, and the first thing you hear is the gentle lapping of canal water just feet from where you slept. You rise and share a simple, warming meal with your family. Perhaps a thick maize porridge called atole, sweetened with a little honey, or a few fresh tortillas, still warm from the clay griddle. You step outside into the pre-dawn mist that blankets the canals. This is the best time for work, a time of cool air and soft light. Your daily routine is not one of frantic, seasonal toil, but of constant, gentle maintenance. Your first task is always a slow, quiet walk around the perimeter of your Chinampas. It is a walking meditation, a daily inspection. You check the squash leaves for any signs of pests. You pull the few audacious weeds that dared to sprout overnight. You check the strength of the wattle fence at the water's edge. Your to-do list is less about monumental, back-breaking projects and more like a daily checklist for a very demanding, very green pet. Check for bugs, provide water, which is done automatically, thank you very much. Offer some fresh mud. Tell it it's a good Chinampa. Today is a market day. After your inspection, you harvest what is ready. A basket of shining, dark green poblano peppers, a pile of tender green beans, onisopti, a bundle of amaranth stalks. Your wife may have gathered a clutch of vibrant marigolds, as flowers are a cash crop as valuable as any vegetable. Together, you load your canoe. It doesn't sit deep in the water. The harvest is fresh, and you only take what you need for the day. Your commute to work involves paddling past your neighbors and offering a quiet morning greeting, a journey far more pleasant than being stuck in rush hour traffic. As you paddle closer to the city, the canals become wider and more crowded, the canoe-based equivalent of moving from a country lane to a major highway. You eventually glide into the vast, bustling space of the market at Tlatelolco. The air here is electric, a dizzying symphony of human voices, the smells of 100 different foods being cooked, and the brilliant colors of textiles, pottery, and produce piled high. You find your family's usual spot, lay out a reed mat, and arrange your goods. Much of the day is spent in the art of trade. While the Aztec Empire did use cacao beans as a form of currency for some transactions, a huge part of the economy was based on barter. Your perfect green beans might be traded for a block of salt brought by merchants from the coast, your chilies for a beautifully painted ceramic pot, your flowers for a handful of sharp obsidian blades. The market is not a chaotic free-for-all. You feel secure here because the market is governed by strict rules. You see market officials, judges, patrolling the aisles, ensuring fair trade. They check to make sure no one is using false measures or selling rotten food. If a dispute arises, if someone tries to shortchange you or pass off a cracked pot as sound, you can take them to a court located right at the edge of the market, where a verdict will be delivered swiftly and justly. This system ensured the market was a place of trust. It's still a subject of discussion how the division of labor was precisely organized within a Chinampero family. But it was a true partnership. While you, the man of the house, might do the heavier work of dredging mud or repairing the fences, your wife and older children are the masters of the harvest, the keepers of the all-important seed nurseries, and the skilled negotiators here at the market. The Chinampa is a family business, and everyone has their role. As the sun begins to dip towards the volcanic peaks that ring the valley, you paddle home, the profits of the day, be they cacao beans or a new tool or a basket of exotic fruit from the lowlands, are stowed safely in the canoe. The evening is a time of peace. Your family gathers for the main meal of the day, perhaps a savory stew with fish caught in a net you'd set that morning in your own canal. By the light of a small, flickering fire, tools are mended, baskets are woven. Evening entertainment probably didn't involve binge-watching the latest series on a screen, but it might involve a grandfather telling a story of the gods, or simply sitting in silence, listening to the symphony of the frogs in the canals, which is basically nature's own ASMR channel, and arguably far more relaxing. You go to sleep with the sounds of the water just outside, your body tired from a day of purposeful work, secure in the knowledge that your small piece of the world is healthy, productive, and ready for you to tend to again tomorrow. As you continue to explore the intricate network of canals, a new and intoxicating reality dawns on you. You glide past one Chinampa, then another. That is not a patchwork of green beans and leafy squash. Instead, it is a solid, blazing carpet of color. One entire island is a sea of brilliant, sunny orange. The next is a shock of deep, velvety crimson. The air, already rich with the scent of damp earth and fresh water, is now thick with a heady, sweet perfume that is almost overwhelming. You quickly realize that these incredible gardens were not just built to feed the empire's stomach, they were also designed to feed its soul. Flowers, or xochitl in the Nahuatl language, held a place of profound importance in the Aztec world. They were not simply a pleasant decoration, they were a central part of their poetry, their art, and their religion. Flowers represented the beauty and fragility of life, a perfect, fleeting gift from the gods. The deity of art, beauty, and dance was Xochipilli, the flower prince, who was always depicted adorned with flowers. For the Aztecs, offering a flower at a temple was a form of prayer, a symbolic communication with the divine, and the spiritual life of the empire demanded flowers on an industrial scale. The demand was insatiable. Every temple and shrine across the city, From the smallest neighborhood altar to the great twin pyramids at the heart of Tenochtitlan, was constantly adorned with immense, elaborate floral arrangements. Priests conducting ceremonies wore heavy garlands of them. Nobles walking through the city would be draped in them. Even the fiercest warriors, the elite eagle and jaguar knights, would go into battle festooned with flowers, a beautiful and terrifying sight. If you were an Aztec event planner, your primary budget item, the one you absolutely could not skimp on, would be flowers. The food, the music, and even the human sacrifices for the gods would all come second to ensuring the event was properly decorated. This deep association between flowers and the sacred bled into even the most violent aspects of their culture. Anthropologists and historians still debate the full, complex meaning behind the Aztec customs of warfare and sacrifice, but flowers were inextricably linked to them. The Aztecs fought pre-arranged ritualistic conflicts with their neighbors called Xochiaoyotl, the Flower Wars. The explicit goal of these battles was not to conquer new territory, but to capture enemy warriors alive. These captives were then brought back to Tenochtitlan and sacrificed, an act the Aztecs believed was necessary to nourish their gods. The name Flower War poetically framed ritual combat as a sacred duty, where the life of a warrior was considered the most precious blossom one could offer to the gods. You drift past a Chinampa dedicated entirely to the Cempasúchil, the Aztec marigold. Its pungent scent and vibrant orange-yellow color were believed to attract and guide the souls of the dead. It was the flower of remembrance, a fragrant pathway connecting the world of the living to the realm of the ancestors. It's a tradition so powerful that it has survived for over 500 years, and the Cempasúchil is still the iconic flower of Mexico's modern Day of the Dead celebrations. You could think of it as a kind of fragrant GPS for the afterlife, a far more poetic guide than a disembodied voice telling a spirit to make a U-turn at the great river of the underworld. Next to it is a plot of dahlias, a flower native to these highlands, whose deep red petals were a symbol of the sun and creation. Nearby, you can smell the intoxicatingly sweet nighttime fragrance of the tuberose, the omixochitl, or bone flower, a plant whose white, waxy petals were closely associated with the moon and the mysteries of the afterlife. In the market, the flower section was its own universe of fragrance and color. You would see artisans sitting amongst mountains of cut flowers, their skilled hands rapidly weaving intricate wreaths, garlands, and elaborate ornaments for every occasion. Being a flower farmer, a Xochimilca, was a respected and potentially lucrative profession. The Chinampas were the perfect environment for floriculture, and a farmer who could consistently produce the most beautiful blossoms could become just as wealthy and influential as a farmer who grew maize. It was the original 1 to 800 flowers, except it was more like paddle up and point, with immediate delivery for anyone with a fast enough canoe. Understanding this deep love for flowers adds a crucial layer to the story of the Chinampas. They were not just a clever solution to a food problem. They were a canvas upon which the Aztecs expressed their most profound cultural values. These gardens provided for the body, yes, but just as importantly, they provided for the spirit, filling the empire with the sacred beauties and fragrance that they believed pleased the gods and gave meaning to human existence. You have seen the Chinampas up close, the masterful engineering, the sustainable cycles, the incredible bounty of food, and the sacred abundance of flowers. Now, you pull back, rising high above the canals, until you can see the entire Valley of Mexico spread out below you. From this vantage point, you can finally understand how these humble, muddy gardens were the engine that fueled one of the most powerful empires in the Americas. At the heart of any empire's might is a simple, fundamental requirement: food. A hungry army cannot fight, and a starving population cannot build, create, or worship. The Chinampa system gave the Aztecs something that was exceedingly rare in the ancient world: a massive, reliable, and centrally located agricultural surplus. They were not living season to season, perpetually on the edge of famine. This constant overflow of produce, grown right at the capital's doorstep, was the bedrock upon which their entire imperial structure was built. The sheer efficiency of the Chinampas had a profound effect on Aztec society. Because a relatively small number of farmers could produce a massive amount of food, it freed up a huge portion of the population to pursue other professions. It's the Aztec version of automation. When your gardens are so productive, they basically run themselves. It gives a society the freedom to specialize. This newly available workforce could become the priests needed to manage a complex and demanding state religion. They could become the artisans, the feather workers, goldsmiths, and sculptors who created the stunning works of art that filled the city. They could become the laborers who built the causeways and the towering pyramid temples. And most critically, they could become soldiers. The Chinampas allowed the Aztecs to field and sustain a large, well-fed, standing army, which they used to project their power across the entire region. This agricultural powerhouse also gave Tenochtitlan a formidable strategic advantage. In most parts of the world, a city under siege was a city slowly starving. An enemy army would surround the walls and simply wait, cutting off the flow of food from the countryside until the city surrendered. But Tenochtitlan was virtually immune to this tactic. Its farms were not in the countryside. They were inside the city's natural defenses. An enemy could control all the land around the lake, but they could not stop the Chinampas from producing food. It was the ultimate defensive posture. "Go ahead, surround us," the Aztecs could confidently say. "We'll be in here eating fresh tomatoes and chili stew while you're out there chewing on tree bark. Let us know how that works out for you." This secure foundation allowed the Aztecs to perfect their system of empire building through tribute. When they conquered a neighboring city-state, they often left the local rulers in place. Their primary demand was tribute, paid at regular intervals. The imperial tribute lists, recorded in documents like the Codex Mendoza, are a testament to the empire's reach. Conquered peoples would send jaguar pelts, brilliant green quetzal feathers, jade, obsidian, cotton textiles, and massive quantities of food, because the capital's core needs were already met by the Chinampas. This tribute could be used to feed the army on campaign or be stored in great granaries, creating a buffer against any possibility of hardship and further cementing the state's power. It's a point of contention among scholars just how evenly this imperial wealth was distributed. The life of the average Chinampero seems to have been one of sufficiency and security, certainly an improvement over the precarious existence of a European peasant at the time. However, the vast riches pouring into Tenochtitlan primarily benefited the noble class, the high-ranking priests, and the warrior elite. It created a highly stratified society with an immense gap between the luxurious lifestyles of the powerful and the simple, hard-working existence of the common people who created the wealth. The Aztec Empire, in some ways, functioned like a giant, multi-level marketing scheme where the product was maize and beans. The people at the top in Tenochtitlan got fabulously wealthy, while the subsidiary towns and villages had to keep supplying their quota or risk a very unpleasant performance review from the guys carrying obsidian-bladed clubs. You can feel the confidence this system must have generated. From their impossible city in the lake, the Aztecs looked out at the world. Their gods were happy, provided with an endless supply of fragrant flowers. Their markets were overflowing. Their armies were victorious. To them, this success was not an accident. It was proof of their divine mandate, their destiny to rule. It is now the year 1518. The empire is at its absolute zenith, powerful, feared, and shimmering with wealth, all of it resting on the muddy soil of the floating gardens. It feels eternal, invincible. But this very success has created a kind of isolation, a belief in their own singular importance, leaving them utterly unaware of a strange new force gathering on the horizon, a fleet of ships from across the great ocean, carrying men and ideas that will challenge this entire world to its very foundations. It is November 1519. The world of the Chinampa, so stable and self-contained, is about to be visited by an unimaginable future. For this part of the story, you are no longer a dispassionate observer. You are a Spanish soldier, one of the few hundred who have followed Hernán Cortés on a mad, desperate gamble into the heart of an unknown continent. You are exhausted, weary, and your steel armor feels heavy and hot under the strange, thin air of these highlands. You have fought battles, climbed mountains, and survived fevers. You have heard wild rumors of a city of gold, but you expect to find nothing more than a large town of mud huts. Then you march over the final high mountain pass, and you stop dead. Before you, the Valley of Mexico unfolds, and it is unlike anything you have ever seen or dreamed. A vast basin holds a string of shimmering lakes that glitter like a sheet of hammered silver in the morning sun. And there, in the very middle of the largest lake, is a city, an impossible city of white towers and temples, connected to the shore by long, impossibly straight causeways. You have seen Seville, the greatest city in Spain. You have seen Rome. Nothing has prepared you for this. You rub your eyes, wondering if you've been chewing on some strange local leaf. Your hometown is a warren of cramped, muddy streets. This city before you looks like someone dropped Venice into a paradise and then gave it a heavenly upgrade. One of your companions, a man named Bernal Diaz del Castillo, will later write that his first thought was that it must be an enchantment, something out of the pages of Amadis of Gaul, a popular book of chivalry and magic. He will write, "We were amazed and said that it was like the enchantments they tell of, on account of the great towers and temples and buildings rising from the water, and all built of masonry, and some of our soldiers even asked whether the things that we saw were not a dream. You feel the same way. It is too grand, too orderly, too fantastical to be real. Slowly, cautiously, your column begins its march down from the mountains and onto the great causeway leading to the city. The road is wide and paved, a feat of engineering that rivals the old Roman roads. On either side, the water is a hive of activity, and it is here that you see them, the floating gardens. Your mind struggles to categorize what you are seeing. They are not boats, but they are not quite islands either. They are perfect, green rectangles, teeming with crops and ablaze with flowers, separated by ruler-straight canals where canoes glide silently. You have never imagined agriculture could look like this. It is so clean, so productive, so organized. As you march, you are aware that you are as much a spectacle to the locals as they are to you. People crowd the edges of the Chinampas and pack into canoes to stare. You hear their murmurs, their strange, soft language. They are not staring at your rusted armor or your pale, bearded face. They are staring at your horses. These great deer, as they call them, fill them with a mixture of terror and awe. They have never seen such creatures. Your large Irish wolfhounds, brought for war, are equally alien. You are in a moment of profound and mutual culture shock, a meeting of two human worlds that have evolved on separate planets. A deep confusion settles over you. You came to this land expecting to find godless savages, and while you know from your native allies that the great pyramids ahead are sites of brutal human sacrifice, the evidence before your eyes is of a civilization of immense sophistication. It's a baffling contradiction. How can people who practice such horrors also build a city that makes Seville look like a provincial slum? It creates a deep cognitive dissonance, a clashing of awe for their engineering and revulsion for their religion. It's a very complicated first impression. Historians still debate the motivations of the individual conquistadors. Were you driven by greed for gold? A holy zeal to convert the heathen? A desperate thirst for glory and a better life than the one you left in Spain? In truth, standing here on this causeway, it is a messy cocktail of all three, mixed with a very large dose of simple fear. You are a few hundred men marching into the heart of an empire of millions. At the end of the causeway, at the gates of the city, a great procession comes to meet you. The crowd falls silent, bowing their heads. At its center, carried in a litter adorned with shimmering green quetzal feathers and gold, is the emperor himself, Moctezuma II. He dismounts and walks towards Cortez. This is the moment. Two worlds, two empires, two faiths meeting in the flesh for the first time. The air is thick with unspoken questions, with tension, and with the heavy weight of destiny. It is the most high-stakes, deeply awkward first meeting in history. You just smile and nod, and pray that no one interprets your shiny helmet as a declaration of war. You are welcomed into Tenochtitlan as a guest. As you walk the clean, wide streets, you are stunned into silence by the wealth, the order, and the sheer scale of it all. You see the overflowing markets, the fragrant flowers, the evidence of the abundance the Chinampas provide. And in that moment, you understand everything. You understand the incredible prize this city represents, and you understand the terrible, mortal danger you and your comrades are now in. The years pass. The brutal, bloody conflict for Tenochtitlan is over, and the Aztec Empire has fallen. A new power, Spain, now rules this valley, and with this new power comes a new way of seeing the world, a worldview that will prove more devastating to the Chinampa system than any army. You watch now, not as a soldier or a farmer, but as a silent witness to a slow, creeping tragedy, the undoing of a masterpiece. The Spanish, in their wisdom, decide to build their new capital, Mexico City, on the exact ruins of the old one. It is a symbolic act of domination, a Christian city built upon the rubble of a pagan one, with the stones of raised Aztec temples often used to build the foundations of new churches. But in choosing this spot, they inherit all of its watery challenges without inheriting any of the Aztec ingenuity for dealing with them. They look at the Chinampas, this intricate web of canals and gardens, and they do not see an elegant solution. They see a messy, chaotic, primitive system. Their ideal of agriculture is the vast open field of Castile, plowed in straight lines by a team of oxen, growing wheat for bread. The Spanish looked at the most productive, sustainable agricultural system on the planet and essentially said, "This is lovely, but what it really needs is a herd of cattle and some barley." This fundamental misunderstanding is the root of the decline. The new rulers introduce their own crops and livestock, none of which are suited for the Chinampa environment. But the more pressing issue is the water itself. The Aztecs had managed the lake levels with their complex system of dikes, causeways, and sluice gates. In the chaos of the conquest and its aftermath, this system fell into disrepair. Major floods began to plague the new colonial capital, just as they had periodically threatened Tenochtitlan. But the Spanish response was not to manage the water. It was to defeat it. They saw the lake not as a partner, but as an enemy to be vanquished. And so began the desagüe, the great drainage. Starting in the early 17th century, the colonial government embarked on one of the most ambitious, expensive, and destructive public works projects in history. Their goal was to drill a hole in the side of the valley, to cut canals and tunnels through the surrounding mountains, to create an artificial outlet for the lakes, to drain the entire basin once and for all. It was a project that would take over 300 years to complete, costing a fortune in silver and a tragic, uncounted number of indigenous lives lost to the brutal, forced labor. You watch, decade by decade, as the plan slowly works. The water level of the Great Lakes begins to drop. It is a slow, almost imperceptible retreat at first, but its effects on the Chinampas are catastrophic. The canals that are the lifeblood of the gardens begin to shrink, turning into muddy ditches. The delicate process of sub-irrigation, which allowed the plants to water themselves, fails. The Chinampas, once perfectly moist and fertile, begin to dry out. As the water recedes, the mineral salts in the soil become concentrated, poisoning the very land that was once so rich. The ahuejote trees, the living anchors of the gardens, find their roots in dry, cracking earth instead of cool water, and they begin to wither and die. It's a source of ongoing historical debate why the Spanish were so doggedly committed to this particular spot. Was it purely the symbolism of conquest? Was it a practical matter of using the existing causeways? Or was it simply a profound failure of imagination, an inability to conceive of a capital city that wasn't a dry, European-style grid? Whatever the reason, in their determination to create a new Seville, they were actively dismantling a paradise. They were effectively unplugging a life support machine that had worked for centuries simply because they insisted on building a city in a place that the land itself was telling them not to. As if this slow strangulation wasn't enough, a final accidental blow came in the late 19th century. In a misguided attempt at beautification, the water hyacinth, a non-native plant, was introduced to the few remaining canals. With no natural predators, it exploded across the water's surface, a thick green mat that choked out all other life, blocking the sunlight and starving the water of oxygen. It was an ecological coup de grace delivered to a system already on its knees. You look out now over a transformed landscape. The vast shimmering sea is gone, replaced by a dusty, windswept plain. The city has sprawled, but it is a city with a new set of self-inflicted problems. Buildings that are slowly sinking into the soft, compacting lake bed, chronic water shortages, and choking dust storms in the dry season. The project to fix the flooding problem was a great success if you completely ignore the fact that it destroyed a unique ecosystem, wrecked the region's traditional agriculture, and caused the entire capital to start sinking. Apart from that, a total win. The vibrant, living world of the Chinampas has been reduced to a shadow of its former self, a ghost haunting the edges of a modern metropolis. But it is not entirely gone. A faint echo still remains. To find what remains of that great water world, you must travel through time once more, all the way to the present day. You find yourself in the south of the vast, sprawling megalopolis of Mexico City, in a place with a familiar name, Xochimilco. This is the last echo of the Great Lake Texcoco, the final, fragile remnant of the Chinampa system. Here, the canals still exist. The water still flows as you drift in a brightly painted, flat-bottomed boat called a trajinera. The scene is at first a riot of festive chaos. The main canals are packed with other boats, filled with families celebrating birthdays, tourists snapping photos, and roving mariachi bands in full costume, ready to play a song for a few pesos. You can buy hot, roasted corn and cold drinks from a vendor in a passing canoe. It's a beautiful, noisy, and slightly surreal spectacle, as if the ancient Aztec waterway has been remixed into a floating theme park. But you ask your boatman to steer you away from the noise, down the quieter, narrower channels, and here, the modern world begins to fall away. The sound of the mariachis is replaced by the buzz of insects and the calls of waterfowl. You begin to see them, working chinampas. You see the tall, graceful forms of the ahuejote willows, their roots still holding the land together. You see farmers tending to rows of lettuce and cilantro. You see the rich, dark soil. It is a quiet, living museum. In recognition of this unique cultural landscape, a living testament to Aztec ingenuity, Xochimilco was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987. Yet this surviving remnant is fragile. The canals are threatened by pollution from the surrounding city. Urban sprawl creeps ever closer. threatening to swallow these last green spaces. And in a strange, modern twist, you might even float past a particularly creepy chinampa known as the Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls, covered in hundreds of decaying, weathered dolls. Hung from the trees by its late owner, it has become a bizarre tourist attraction, a modern ghost story grafted onto the ancient agricultural land. It's a stark reminder that even a 700-year-old farming system isn't immune from developing its own weird, haunted side hustles. Despite these threats, there is a powerful seed of hope here. Ecologists and urban planners are now debating how the core principles of Chinampa agriculture could be adapted for the 21st century. In a world facing climate change and a need for local food security, this ancient system, which is hyper-productive, requires no artificial fertilizer, creates its own soil, and filters the water around it, is being looked at with fresh eyes. A new generation of Mexican farmers and chefs is working to restore abandoned chinampas, growing high-quality organic produce for the city's finest restaurants, and reconnecting their community with its incredible agricultural heritage. After centuries of being seen as obsolete, the Chinampa is proving that sometimes the most ancient ideas are the most futuristic. It is the ultimate, gentle, I told you so, from the Aztec farmers. Here, in the lapping waters of modern Xochimilco, you can feel the entire arc of the story. The brilliant innovation born of necessity, the powerhouse that fueled an empire, the tragedy of its near destruction, and the stubborn, beautiful resilience of an idea that simply refuses to disappear. The gardens and the water remember, and so our journey through time comes to a soft and quiet close. The vibrant colors of the trajineras begin to fade. The sounds of the market and the city melt away into a gentle hum, and all we are left with is the slow, rhythmic rocking of a canoe on calm water. You can let the details of the story begin to blur now, allowing the facts and the names to drift away like pollen on a soft breeze. All that matters now is this feeling of gentle movement, this sense of floating in a quiet, safe, and ancient place. Feel the cool night air on your skin and smell the faint, distant perfume of flowers and damp, fertile earth. There is nothing left to learn, nothing left to see. The story is over, and you can feel your thoughts beginning to slow down, sinking deeper and deeper into the comfortable darkness, drifting peacefully towards a quiet and restorative sleep. The gentle lapping of the water against the side of the canoe is the only sound you need to hear. A soft, steady rhythm guiding you down into your own deep and tranquil dreams.